Rebecca Fields' seemingly perfect life unravels when she discovers her husband Daniel's infidelity, setting off a chain of betrayals that go far deeper than she imagined. As Rebecca delves into the truth, she uncovers not only Daniel's affair, but also a web of deceit involving financial manipulation and emotional exploitation of multiple women. The story explores themes of betrayal, greed, and justice, with shocking revelations that leave audiences enraged at Daniel's calculated cruelty. Rebecca's fight for truth and accountability becomes a gripping tale of resilience, drawing viewers into her battle against the man who shattered her trust. Welcome back to another deep dive into the cheating diaries. Today, we're peeling back the layers on a story that will leave you questioning just how far someone will go when pushed to the brink. But first, tell me where you're tuning in from. Drop your location in the comments, and let's see how far our little community stretches. Now grab your popcorn, because this one's a doozy. Let's dive in. It's 2015, Chicago. The city is alive with the hum of ambition. Skyscrapers glint in the afternoon sun, their reflections dancing across the waters of Lake Michigan. Our story begins in an upscale neighborhood, the kind that whispers, "Old money," with its ivy-covered brownstones and meticulously trimmed hedges. Enter Rebecca Fields, 38, a successful interior designer whose talents have made her a household name among the Chicago elite. Rebecca's world seems picture-perfect. She's creative, driven, and the kind of person who can command a room without raising her voice. But today, Rebecca isn't focusing on high-end decor or celebrity clients. No, today, her attention is on her husband, Daniel. Daniel Fields is every bit the charming husband. On paper, he's a senior financial advisor at a prestigious firm known for his smooth-talking demeanor and impeccably tailored suits. To outsiders, he's the quintessential family man. To Rebecca, though, Daniel is starting to feel like a distant stranger. The cracks in their marriage, invisible to the world, are beginning to show. Rebecca notices the little things first: late nights at the office, muted phone calls, the way his laughter doesn't quite reach his eyes anymore. But she brushes it off. After all, what marriage doesn't have its ebbs and flows? Their home, a modern masterpiece in glass and stone, feels colder than ever. Even their once spirited arguments have dissolved into a disquieting silence. Rebecca, ever the optimist, chalks it up to stress. Maybe he's just under pressure at work, she tells herself. But deep down, she knows something is wrong. The turning point comes on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday. Rebecca is reorganizing their shared walk-in closet, something she does when she needs to clear her mind. She's halfway through sorting Daniel's ties when she notices it: a scarlet-red cocktail dress tucked in the back corner of his section. At first, she assumes it's a gift, a surprise for her, maybe. But as her fingers trace the fabric, doubt sets in. The dress is a size too small, and the tag still hangs from the zipper. Rebecca's heart skips a beat. She checks the receipt stapled to the tag. It's dated 2 weeks ago. The store, a boutique she's never heard of, isn't exactly Daniel's style. Her thoughts spiral, but she pushes them aside. It could be for his assistant, she rationalizes, a favor for a friend. Still, she decides not to mention it. Not yet. The Fields' 10th wedding anniversary is a low-key affair, Rebecca's idea. She prefers intimate celebrations, so Daniel books a table at a Michelin-starred restaurant downtown. The atmosphere is perfect: soft jazz, dim lighting, the clink of wine glasses blending into the background hum of conversation. Rebecca wears a classic black dress, simple but elegant. Daniel, as always, looks polished. They toast to their decade together. But Rebecca can't shake the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. The conversation flows, but it feels rehearsed, like two actors playing roles they no longer believe in. Midway through the meal, Daniel's phone buzzes. He excuses himself, stepping away from the table to take the call. Rebecca's eyes follow him as he moves toward the lobby. She can't hear his words, but the tension in his shoulders is telling. When he returns, he's visibly distracted, his charm slipping like a mask that's grown too heavy to hold in place. "Everything okay?" Rebecca asks, her voice light, masking her concern. "Work stuff," Daniel replies, forcing a smile. "Nothing to worry about." But Rebecca knows better. She watches as he fiddles with his wedding ring, a habit he's picked up recently. and wonders just how much of the man she married is still sitting across from her. The days that follow are a blur of unanswered questions and rising tension. Rebecca starts paying closer attention. She notices how Daniel's schedule has become increasingly erratic, how his excuses feel less convincing. Then there's his phone, always on silent, always face down on the table. One evening, while Daniel is showering, Rebecca gives in to the temptation she's been battling for weeks. She picks up his phone, heart pounding, and tries to unlock it. The passcode, once familiar, no longer works. A cold knot of dread tightens in her stomach. The final straw comes one Friday night. Daniel has another business dinner, leaving Rebecca to spend the evening alone. She pours herself a glass of wine and settles into the couch, flipping through channels absent-mindedly. Around 10 p.m., she hears the faint hum of his car pulling into the driveway. She peeks through the blinds, expecting to see Daniel, but instead, she sees him and her. A tall brunette steps out of the passenger seat, laughing as she clings to Daniel's arm. Rebecca's heart sinks. She watches as Daniel leans in, their silhouettes framed against the soft glow of the porch light. It's not a kiss, but it's close enough. Close enough to shatter the fragile trust Rebecca had been clinging to. When Daniel finally comes inside, Rebecca is already upstairs, pretending to be asleep, but her mind is racing. The red dress, the phone, the mysterious calls, everything clicks into place. Her hands tremble as she clutches the duvet, hot tears streaming down her face. For Rebecca, this isn't just about infidelity. It's about betrayal. It's about realizing that the life she thought she had might have been a lie all along. Rebecca couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of Daniel and that woman under the porch light. Her mind raced with questions. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Most importantly, how could Daniel betray her like this after everything they'd built together? By the next morning, Rebecca had made up her mind. She needed answers, and she needed them now. At breakfast, Daniel sat across from her, casually scrolling through his phone while sipping coffee. Rebecca studied him, trying to decide the best way to approach the subject. "Late night at the office?" she asked, her voice light, but edged with tension. Daniel barely looked up. "Yeah, big project coming up. You know how it is." Her grip tightened around her mug. She wanted to scream, to demand he tell her the truth, but she forced herself to stay calm. Blowing up now wouldn't get her what she needed. Instead, Rebecca decided to do something she never thought she'd do: spy on her husband. Later that day, Rebecca dug through old boxes in the attic until she found it, an outdated but functional digital recorder. She slipped it into Daniel's car that evening, hiding it under the driver's seat. If he wasn't going to tell her the truth, she'd find it herself. For the next few days, Rebecca waited anxiously. Each night, when Daniel returned from his meetings, she retrieved the recorder and listened to the conversations. At first, it was just mundane calls with clients or colleagues, but on the third night, she struck gold. "God, I can't wait to see you again." Daniel's voice came through the recorder, low and intimate. Rebecca's stomach turned. Then came the woman's voice, soft, seductive, and unmistakably familiar. It was Clara Simmons, Daniel's co-worker. Rebecca remembered meeting her at a holiday party a year ago. Clara had been all smiles and compliments, even joking that Rebecca was so lucky to have such a devoted husband. The betrayal hit harder than Rebecca expected. It wasn't just the affair. It was the fact that Daniel had been lying to her face while parading Clara around like nothing was wrong. For the first time in weeks, Rebecca felt something stronger than heartbreak: anger. Rebecca knew she couldn't confront Daniel without a plan. She needed to hit him where it hurt, and that meant playing the long game. But first, she needed to understand the full extent of his betrayal. The next morning, Rebecca called her best friend. Lauren was the kind of person you called when you needed someone to tell you the truth. No sugarcoating. After hearing the story, Lauren didn't mince words. "You need to lawyer up," Lauren said, her voice firm. "If he's cheating, there's a good chance he's hiding other things too. Money, assets. You need to protect yourself." Rebecca hadn't even thought about that. Her anger was so focused on the affair that she hadn't considered what else Daniel might be keeping from her. But Lauren was right. If Daniel was willing to betray her heart, he'd have no problem betraying her financially, too. That afternoon, Rebecca made an appointment with a divorce attorney. Sitting in the sleek office, she felt a mixture of fear and determination. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Vanessa, wasted no time. "We'll start by gathering evidence," Vanessa explained. "Emails, financial records, anything that shows he's been dishonest. If he's having an affair, we can use that to strengthen your case." Rebecca nodded, her mind racing evidence. She already had some from the recorder, but now she realized she needed more. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca played the role of the oblivious wife. She smiled through dinners, listened to Daniel's excuses, and even helped him pick out a new suit for work events. All the while, she was quietly building her case. She went through old bank statements, noting suspicious transfers and unexplained expenses. She combed through Daniel's emails when he wasn't home, taking screenshots of anything incriminating. What she found was worse than she imagined. Not only was Daniel spending thousands of dollars on gifts for Clara, but he was also siphoning money from their joint account into a secret fund. The betrayal felt like a knife, twisting deeper with every discovery. One night, as Rebecca sat in her home office poring over the evidence, she had a moment of doubt. Was she doing the right thing? Couldn't they just sit down and talk it out? Maybe there was still a chance to save their marriage. But then she remembered the laughter she heard on the recorder, the way Daniel spoke to Clara with a tenderness he hadn't shown her in years. She thought of all the lies he'd told her, the trust he'd shattered. No, she realized. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about respect, about standing up for herself and reclaiming her life. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, staring at the pile of evidence on her desk. She wasn't the same woman who'd cried herself to sleep weeks ago. She was stronger now, smarter, and she was ready to fight. One by one, Rebecca's plans started falling into place. With Vanessa's help, she filed for divorce and froze the joint account before Daniel could drain it further. She hired a private investigator to dig deeper into his finances and uncovered more damning secrets: offshore accounts, shady business deals, and even a fake charity he'd been using to launder money. But Rebecca wasn't content with just exposing Daniel's lies. She wanted him to feel the consequences of his actions in every part of his life. She leaked anonymous tips to the firm where Daniel worked, hinting at his financial misconduct. Within days, whispers of an internal investigation began circulating. Meanwhile, Rebecca's relationship with Lauren became her lifeline. They spent hours brainstorming, laughing, and sometimes crying over glasses of wine. Lauren encouraged Rebecca to channel her anger into something productive, and soon, Rebecca started focusing on her own career again. Rebecca's business had taken a back seat during the turmoil. But now, she threw herself into her work with renewed energy. She took on new clients, revamped her portfolio, and even started a blog about interior design. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. As the weeks went by, the tension in the Fields household became unbearable. Daniel knew something was wrong, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Rebecca played her part perfectly, smiling just enough to keep him off guard, while quietly dismantling his life piece by piece. Then came the day Daniel's world finally came crashing down. It started with a call from his boss, informing him that he was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Hours later, he received notice of the divorce filing, complete with Rebecca's demands for full ownership of their home and a significant share of his assets. When Daniel confronted Rebecca that evening, she was calm, almost serene. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded, his voice filled with disbelief. Rebecca met his gaze, her expression unflinching. "Why? Because you lied to me. You betrayed me. And now, you're going to face the consequences." Rebecca knew the storm she unleashed wasn't just brewing. It had already arrived. The days following her confrontation with Daniel were filled with chaos, both inside and outside their home. The calm veneer of their marriage had been shattered, replaced by heated arguments and simmering tension. Daniel, once so composed, was now unraveling before her eyes. "You've gone too far," Daniel yelled one evening, his face flushed with anger. He paced the living room like a caged animal, clutching a stack of legal papers. "You froze our accounts, Rebecca. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you're causing?" Rebecca sat on the couch, her arms crossed, a calm defiance in her posture. "Trouble, Daniel. You're the one who caused this. You lied, you cheated, and you stole from me. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Daniel threw the papers onto the coffee table, the force sending a few pages fluttering to the floor. You're trying to ruin me. No, Daniel, Rebecca said, her voice cold and deliberate. You ruined yourself. I'm just making sure you don't get away with it. The fallout from Rebecca's actions wasn't limited to their household word of Daniel's misconduct spread like wildfire through his firm. His once admired reputation, now a smoldering wreckage. The internal investigation had unearthed irregularities in his accounts. Irregularities Rebecca had strategically leaked to the right people. Daniel's co-workers, once eager to bask in his charm, now avoided him like a leper. Meetings became awkward, and whispers followed him down the hallways. By the end of the week, Daniel received the news he dreaded most. He was being terminated, effective immediately. That evening, Daniel returned home, his usual confident stride replaced by a defeated shuffle. Rebecca was in the kitchen, slicing vegetables for dinner, when she heard the front door close. "You're home early," she said without turning around. Daniel didn't respond at first. He stood in the doorway, watching her with a mix of anger and disbelief. Finally, he spoke. "I lost my job." Rebecca set the knife down and turned to face him. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, though her tone carried no real sympathy. "But maybe it's for the best. Now you'll have more time to reflect on your choices." Daniel clenched his fists, his face a storm of emotions. "You've taken everything from me. My job, my reputation. What's next, Rebecca? Are you going to burn the house down too?" Rebecca tilted her head, a small bitter smile playing on her lips. "I don't need to, Daniel. You've done a fine job of that all on your own." Meanwhile, Rebecca's private investigator delivered the final pieces of the puzzle photos of Daniel and Clara at a luxury resort, timestamps proving he'd been using business trips as cover for his escapades. But the real bombshell came in the form of financial records, evidence that Daniel had funneled money not only into secret accounts, but also into Clara's name. Vanessa was thrilled with the findings. "This is airtight," she told Rebecca during a meeting. "With this evidence, we can ensure a favorable divorce settlement. He won't have a leg to stand on." But Rebecca wasn't done yet. The financial betrayal stung just as deeply as the emotional one, and she wanted Daniel to feel every ounce of the pain he'd caused her. That's when she decided to confront Clara directly. The confrontation took place at a chic coffee shop downtown, one of Clara's favorite haunts according to the investigator's report. Rebecca arrived early, dressed in her usual understated elegance, and took a seat by the window. When Clara walked in, her glossy hair and designer outfit screamed confidence. She didn't notice Rebecca until she was standing directly in her path. "Clara," Rebecca said, her voice calm but cutting. "Do you have a moment?" Clara froze, her eyes widening in recognition. "Rebecca, I didn't expect to see you here." "Clearly," Rebecca replied, gesturing to the empty seat across from her. "Sit, we need to talk." Clara hesitated but eventually sat down, her usual composure faltering under Rebecca's piercing gaze. "I know about the affair," Rebecca began, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "I know about the money, the trips, all of it, and I want you to know that it's over." Clara opened her mouth to respond, but Rebecca held up a hand to silence her. "Don't bother denying it. The evidence speaks for itself. Daniel might have fooled me for a while, but not anymore." Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Rebecca, I don't care about your excuses," Rebecca interrupted. "What I care about is making sure neither of you gets away with this. Daniel's losing everything, and if you're smart, you'll walk away before you lose whatever scraps he's thrown your way." Clara's face flushed, but she didn't say anything. Rebecca stood, tossing a few bills onto the table to cover her coffee. "Enjoy your latte," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "It might be the last luxury you can afford for a while." Back at home, Rebecca continued her quiet dismantling of Daniel's world. She reached out to the firm's HR department, providing additional evidence of his misconduct that ensured he wouldn't be rehired elsewhere. She also worked with Vanessa to fast-track the divorce proceedings, leaving Daniel scrambling to catch up. But the biggest blow came when Rebecca discovered Daniel's secret offshore account. With the help of Vanessa and the private investigator, she was able to trace the funds back to a fraudulent charity Daniel had set up years ago. The discovery led to an anonymous tip to the authorities, sparking a federal investigation. Daniel's life was crumbling faster than he could keep up. His relationship with Clara fell apart under the strain, their once passionate affair reduced to bitter arguments, and blame Clara eventually left him, taking whatever gifts she could carry, and disappearing from his life without so much as a goodbye. Meanwhile, Rebecca was thriving. Her business had taken off, her newfound confidence drawing in high-profile clients and lucrative projects. She even started hosting workshops for aspiring designers, sharing her knowledge and experience with others. Rebecca's personal life also began to heal. She reconnected with old friends, attended social events, and even allowed herself to flirt with the idea of dating again. For the first time in years, she felt free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the weight of a marriage that had long since lost its spark. The turning point came when Daniel received a summons to appear in court. The federal investigation had uncovered enough evidence to charge him with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Facing the possibility of prison time, Daniel reached out to Rebecca in desperation. He showed up at her doorstep one rainy evening, looking nothing like the confident man she once knew. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes hollow with exhaustion. "Rebecca," he began, his voice trembling, "I need your help." Rebecca crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Help? You must be joking." "I'm serious," he said, his tone pleading. "I'm in real trouble here. The feds are after me. Clara's gone, and I don't have anyone else to turn to." Rebecca let out a bitter laugh. "You think I'm going to help you after everything you've done, after you lied, cheated, and tried to steal from me?" Daniel looked down, his shoulders slumping into defeat. "I made mistakes, Rebecca. I know that. But I'm begging you, please." For a moment, Rebecca considered slamming the door in his face. But then she realized something. This was the closure she needed. Seeing Daniel reduced to this broken shell of a man was all the vindication she required. "I'll give you some advice," she said, her voice steady and firm. "Own up to what you've done. Face the consequences. Maybe then you'll learn something." Before he could respond, Rebecca shut the door, the sound echoing through the house like a final punctuation mark on their story. Rebecca had thought the worst was over. She had taken control of her life, dismantled Daniel's lies, and positioned herself for a fresh start. But just as the dust began to settle, a new twist threatened to upend everything. It started with a phone call. Rebecca was in her home office, reviewing designs for a client's new luxury penthouse, when her phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it made her stomach turn. "Ms. Fields," a firm voice greeted her when she answered. "This is Special Agent Harris with the FBI. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your ex-husband, Daniel Fields." Rebecca froze, the blood draining from her face. "Ex-husband?" she repeated. "We're still in the process of divorcing." "My apologies," Agent Harris said. "I meant your husband. This is regarding the federal investigation into his fraudulent activities. It appears some of the accounts in question are joint accounts under both of your names." The words hit her like a freight train. Joint accounts. She thought back to the meticulous evidence she'd gathered, but nothing had indicated she might be implicated in Daniel's schemes. Her hands trembled as she tried to steady her voice. "I'd be happy to cooperate," she said. "I had no knowledge of his activities." "We understand," Harris replied, "but we'll need to review any financial records you have access to, as well as ask you some additional questions. Are you available to meet in person this week?" Rebecca's mind raced. "Of course, just let me know the time and place." After hanging up, she leaned back in her chair, the enormity of the situation sinking in. Despite all her precautions, Daniel's web of lies had ensnared her too. That evening, Rebecca confronted Daniel one final time. She wasn't sure if he would show up, especially after their last interaction, but she left a message, telling him they needed to talk. To her surprise, Daniel arrived an hour later, looking even more disheveled than before. "What now, Rebecca?" he snapped as he stepped inside. "Haven't you done enough?" She crossed her arms, glaring at him. "The FBI called me today. They think I might be involved in your fraud because of our joint accounts." Daniel's face went pale. "That's ridiculous. You have nothing to do with this." "Exactly," she shot back. "But your name is on those accounts, and that's enough to make me a suspect. How could you drag me into this, Daniel?" He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "You didn't mean for this to happen?" she repeated, her voice rising. "You didn't mean to cheat. To steal. To destroy everything we built. When did you plan on stopping, Daniel? Or were you just going to keep going until there was nothing left? Daniel looked up at her, tears glistening in his eyes. I messed up, Rebecca. I know that. But you don't understand. I was under so much pressure. The firm, the clients. They expected me to perform miracles. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. And you thought the best way to handle that was to betray me, to break every vow you ever made? I didn't want to lose you, he said, his voice cracking. I thought I could fix it before you found out. Well, congratulations, Rebecca said, her voice icy. You've lost me anyway, and now you're dragging me down with you. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I'll fix this, he promised. I'll tell the FBI you had nothing to do with it. I'll take all the blame. You'd better, she said, her voice like steel. Because if you don't, I'll make sure they throw the book at you. The next day, Rebecca met with Agent Harris in a sterile government office. She handed over every piece of evidence she had collected against Daniel, explaining her role, or lack thereof, in his schemes. Harris studied her carefully as she spoke. You've been very thorough, Miss Fields, he said, flipping through the documents. It's clear you've been working to expose your husband's actions. Rebecca nodded, trying to keep her emotions in check. I want to make one thing perfectly clear. I had no idea what Daniel was doing. I only found out after I started looking into his affair. Understood, Harris replied. But we'll still need to follow protocol. Expect to be called as a witness if this goes to trial. Rebecca exhaled, relieved but wary. She had done everything in her power to protect herself, but she knew the road ahead would be anything but smooth. As the weeks went on, the investigation into Daniel deepened. More victims came forward, claiming they had been duped by his fake charity or manipulated into bad financial deals. The media caught wind of the story, and soon Daniel's face was plastered across every news channel as the disgraced financier who betrayed his clients, his firm, and his family. Rebecca watched the coverage with mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt vindicated seeing Daniel finally face the consequences of his actions. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the fear that her name might still be dragged through the mud. Then came the day of Daniel's arrest. The sight of him being led out of his condo in handcuffs, his head bowed and his suit rumpled, was surreal. Rebecca felt an odd sense of closure watching it unfold on live television. The man who had once seemed untouchable was now just another criminal brought to justice. Despite everything, Rebecca refused to let the scandal define her. She poured herself into her work, using the turmoil as fuel to push her business to new heights. Her blog gained traction, her workshops were fully booked, and she even started writing a book about her experiences, part memoir, part guide to reclaiming one's life after betrayal. Her friends rallied around her, offering support and encouragement. Lauren, ever the practical one, summed it up best during a celebratory dinner. You didn't just survive, Rebecca. You thrived, and that's the best revenge you could have ever gotten. Rebecca smiled, raising her glass. To new beginnings. But even as Rebecca rebuilt her life, there was one final chapter to close. She decided to attend Daniel's sentencing, not out of sympathy, but to see the story through to its end. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with tension. Daniel sat at the defendant's table, looking gaunt and defeated. When the judge handed down the sentence, 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole, Rebecca felt a weight lift from her shoulders. As she left the courtroom, a reporter approached her, microphone in hand. Ms. Fields, do you have any comment on your husband's sentencing? Rebecca paused, her expression calm but resolute. He made his choices, and now he's facing the consequences. That's all there is to say. Back in her newly redecorated home, Rebecca sat on the couch, a glass of wine in hand. She looked around at the space she had transformed, a reflection of her own journey. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a symbol of her strength, her resilience, and her ability to rise above the ashes of betrayal. Her phone buzzed with a notification, a comment on her latest blog post. It was from a reader who had been following her journey, thanking her for sharing her story and inspiring others to take control of their lives. Rebecca smiled, setting the phone down. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. The aftermath of Daniel's sentencing left a ripple effect, but for Rebecca, the biggest storm had yet to come. While she had been clearing her name and protecting herself from Daniel's financial misdeeds, a new and unexpected threat was brewing, one she couldn't have anticipated. 2 weeks after Daniel's conviction, Rebecca received a call from Vanessa, her divorce attorney. "Rebecca," Vanessa began, her tone grave, "I've just received word that Daniel's family is contesting the divorce settlement." Rebecca's stomach sank. "What? On what grounds?" "They're claiming that some of the assets we secured in the divorce are part of a family trust," Vanessa explained. "They're arguing that you have no legal claim to them." Rebecca felt the weight of the words settle on her chest. "But that's not true. We built those assets together during our marriage." Vanessa sighed. "I know, and we have the documentation to prove it, but this is going to be a fight. Daniel's family has deep pockets and influential connections. They're pulling every string they can to minimize the damage to their name." The thought of yet another battle was almost too much to bear. Rebecca had thought she was done fighting, but it seemed Daniel's betrayal had one last sting. As Rebecca prepared for the legal showdown, she leaned on Lauren for support. Over a glass of wine at Lauren's apartment, she vented her frustrations. "I can't believe this is happening," Rebecca said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "I've already lost so much because of Daniel. Now his family wants to take what little I have left." Lauren placed a comforting hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "You've already beaten Daniel. His family is just grasping at straws. You're stronger than they are, and you have the truth on your side." Rebecca nodded, but the fight ahead felt like an uphill climb. She couldn't help but wonder how much more she could take. The courtroom was tense as Rebecca faced off against Daniel's family. The Fields were an imposing group, dressed in designer suits and exuding an air of entitlement. They treated Rebecca with thinly veiled disdain, as if she were an interloper trying to steal what didn't belong to her. But Rebecca refused to be intimidated. When called to the stand, she spoke with conviction, detailing her contributions to the assets in question and the sacrifices she had made during her marriage. Vanessa presented meticulous records to support Rebecca's claims, leaving no room for doubt. By the time the proceedings concluded, Rebecca felt a glimmer of hope. The judge seemed unimpressed with the Fields' arguments, and their lawyer appeared visibly flustered. The final verdict came 2 weeks later. The court ruled in Rebecca's favor, affirming her right to the contested assets. The Fields' faces were a mix of shock and fury as the judge delivered the decision, but Rebecca felt an overwhelming sense of relief. As she left the courthouse, Rebecca turned to Vanessa. "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." Vanessa smiled. "You didn't just win, Rebecca. You stood up for yourself and showed them you're not someone to be underestimated." With the legal battles finally behind her, Rebecca began to rebuild her life in earnest. She sold the house she had shared with Daniel, using the proceeds to buy a smaller, cozier home in a quiet neighborhood. It was a fresh start, untainted by memories of betrayal. Rebecca also launched a new initiative through her design business, offering free consultations to women who were rebuilding their lives after divorce or loss. She found a sense of purpose in helping others, turning her pain into a source of strength. One evening, Rebecca received an unexpected visitor. Clara stood on her doorstep, looking nervous and uncertain. "I didn't think you'd want to see me," Clara said, her voice hesitant. Rebecca crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "What do you want, Clara?" "I came to apologize," Clara said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I made a mistake. I let myself get caught up in Daniel's lies, and I hurt you in the process. I'm so sorry." Rebecca studied her for a long moment. She could see the guilt and regret in Clara's expression, but forgiveness didn't come easily. "I appreciate your apology," Rebecca said finally, "but I think we both know it's a little late." Clara nodded, wiping her eyes. I wanted you to know that I've changed. I've started therapy, and I'm trying to make amends if there's anything I can do." "There isn't," Rebecca interrupted, "but I hope you find what you're looking for." Clara nodded again, turning to leave. As Rebecca watched her walk away, she felt a strange sense of closure. Clara's apology didn't erase the pain, but it was a reminder that even those who hurt her were capable of growth. Months later, Rebecca stood in the lobby of a luxury hotel, preparing to give a keynote speech at a women's empowerment conference. The room was filled with women who had faced their own struggles and emerged stronger on the other side. As Rebecca took the stage, she felt a surge of pride. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady and confident. "Tonight, I want to talk about resilience, about finding the strength to rebuild when your world falls apart." She shared her story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. She spoke about the importance of self-worth, the power of community, and the value of turning pain into purpose. By the time she finished, the room erupted in applause. As Rebecca left the conference, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a comment on one of her blog posts, thanking her for being an inspiration. Rebecca smiled, slipping her phone into her bag. She had come a long way from the woman who cried herself to sleep in the wake of Daniel's betrayal. She had faced the storm, fought back, and emerged stronger than ever. Her journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to embrace whatever came next. Rebecca had barely begun to catch her breath after the court battle with the Fields when a new, even more shocking revelation surfaced. This time, it wasn't about Daniel's misdeeds or his family's meddling. It was about the very foundation of his betrayal. Vanessa called Rebecca late one evening, her tone urgent. "Rebecca, you need to come to my office now." Rebecca, sensing the gravity of the situation, didn't hesitate. She arrived within the hour, her nerves on edge. Vanessa greeted her with a folder in hand, her expression unreadable. "What's going on?" Rebecca asked, her voice tinged with apprehension. Vanessa handed her the folder. "We received this anonymously. I've verified its contents, and, well, you need to see for yourself." Rebecca opened the folder and scanned the first few pages. Her eyes widened as the pieces clicked into place. Bank statements, email correspondence, and legal documents painted a picture of something far worse than she could have imagined. "Clara wasn't the only one," Vanessa said softly. "Daniel's affair was part of a pattern he was using multiple women, not just for emotional or physical satisfaction, but for financial gain. Some of these women were wealthy clients. He manipulated them into making investments that funneled money back to his fraudulent accounts." Rebecca's hands trembled as she absorbed the information. "You're telling me he was conning these women while pretending to love them?" Vanessa nodded. "And there's more. It appears one of the women discovered his scheme before you did. She tried to confront him, but Daniel threatened her with legal action. She's been living in fear ever since." Rebecca felt a surge of anger. Unlike anything she had experienced before, Daniel hadn't just betrayed her. He had exploited and victimized others in ways that were both cruel and calculated. Fueled by this new revelation, Rebecca decided it was time to bring the other women into the fold. With Vanessa's help, she tracked down two of Daniel's victims, a widowed philanthropist named Eleanor, and a young entrepreneur named Sophie. Both women were initially hesitant to talk, their experiences leaving them distrustful and guarded. Rebecca met with them at a quiet cafe, her heart pounding as she introduced herself. "I know this is difficult," she began, "but I believe we've all been hurt by the same man. If we work together, we can ensure he never does this to anyone else." Eleanor and Sophie exchanged wary glances, but eventually opened up. Eleanor described how Daniel had charmed his way into her life after her husband's death, convincing her to invest a significant portion of her inheritance into a venture that later disappeared without a trace. Sophie shared a similar story, detailing how Daniel had used flattery and false promises to gain access to her fledgling business's accounts. By the end of the meeting, the three women had formed a tentative alliance. Together, they began compiling their evidence, determined to expose Daniel's full web of deceit. Meanwhile, Daniel, now behind bars, remained unaware of the storm brewing outside. His arrogance blinded him to the possibility that his victims might unite against him. He spent his days scheming ways to reduce his sentence, oblivious to the fact that Rebecca and her newfound allies were working tirelessly to ensure he faced the full consequences of his actions. One pivotal moment came when Eleanor managed to recover an old email chain between herself and Daniel. The messages, filled with promises of lucrative returns and thinly veiled threats, were damning. Sophie contributed financial records showing how Daniel had siphoned funds from her business, while Rebecca provided detailed accounts of his fraudulent charity. The evidence painted a clear picture of a man who had built his empire on lies and manipulation. Vanessa, impressed by the thoroughness of their findings, decided it was time to go public. The media response was explosive. News outlets ran headline after headline, detailing Daniel's schemes, dubbing him the silver-tongued con man. Rebecca, Eleanor, and Sophie became unlikely heroines, their bravery in coming forward earning them widespread praise. But not everyone was supportive of Daniel's family, still clinging to their tarnished reputation, launched a smear campaign against the women they accused Rebecca of orchestrating a vendetta, and dismissed the other victims as opportunists seeking attention. Rebecca refused to back down. She took to social media, sharing her story in her own words. Her post went viral, resonating with countless others who had experienced betrayal and manipulation. Messages of support poured in from around the world, strengthening her resolve. As the case against Daniel gained momentum, Rebecca faced one final confrontation. It came in the form of a letter, handwritten, delivered to her home by courier. It was from Daniel. The letter was filled with apologies, excuses, and pleas for forgiveness. He claimed he had changed, that prison had made him see the error of his ways. He begged Rebecca to visit him, to give him a chance to explain. Rebecca read the letter twice before setting it aside. She had no intention of granting Daniel the closure he sought for her. This wasn't about forgiveness. It was about justice. The climax of Rebecca's journey came in the form of a televised interview. She, Eleanor, and Sophie appeared together, their unity a powerful statement. They recounted their experiences with Daniel, their voices unwavering as they shared the pain and resilience that had brought them to this moment. When asked what they hoped to achieve, Rebecca's response was clear. We want accountability, not just for Daniel, but for anyone who thinks they can exploit and betray others without consequences. Our stories matter, and we won't be silenced. The interview struck a chord with viewers, sparking conversations about power, trust, and the importance of standing up to injustice. Daniel's final reckoning came in the form of additional charges, brought forth by the combined efforts of Rebecca, Eleanor, and Sophie. The evidence was overwhelming, and the court had no choice but to extend his sentence. As the judge handed down the verdict, Rebecca felt a sense of closure she hadn't thought possible. This time, the courtroom wasn't a place of fear or uncertainty. It was a place of triumph. Rebecca left with her head held high, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The air in the courthouse was thick with tension, as Rebecca walked through the doors for what she knew would be the final hearing. After months of battles, investigations, and unearthing every last thread of Daniel's deceptions, this moment had arrived like the crest of a relentless wave. This wasn't just about justice for herself anymore. It was about ensuring no one else would fall victim to Daniel's manipulative schemes. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, family members, and even former colleagues of Daniel's had gathered to witness the outcome. Rebecca took her seat beside Vanessa, who gave her a reassuring nod. Across the aisle, Daniel sat with his defense team. Despite the orange jumpsuit, he somehow managed to exude a shadow of his former arrogance, his sharp gaze darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The proceedings began with the prosecution outlining the new charges brought against Daniel, including financial fraud, emotional manipulation for monetary gain, and falsification of legal documents. Each charge hit like a hammer, and Rebecca could feel the weight of every word echoing through the courtroom. The climax of the hearing came when Rebecca was called to testify. As she stood and made her way to the witness stand, she felt a wave of nervous energy. But then she looked at Daniel, his face pale and his bravado faltering, and her resolve solidified. She had faced him before, and she would do it again. Ms. Fields, the prosecutor began, can you describe how you first discovered your husband's fraudulent activities? Rebecca recounted the moment she found the red dress, the initial seed of doubt that had spiraled into a full-blown investigation. Her voice was steady, each word measured, as she described the betrayal, the lies, and the financial chaos Daniel had left in his wake. The defense tried to paint her as vindictive, accusing her of seeking revenge rather than justice, but Rebecca didn't waver. When asked why she had gone to such lengths to expose Daniel, her answer was clear. Because he thought he could get away with it. Daniel used people, women, clients, even his own family, to build a life that was nothing but a facade. Someone had to hold him accountable. As the hearing continued, the prosecution brought forward more witnesses. Eleanor and Sophie took the stand, their testimonies painting an even darker picture of Daniel's manipulations. Eleanor, with her dignified presence, described how Daniel had exploited her grief and trust, while Sophie's fiery determination revealed how close her business had come to collapsing because of his lies. The turning point came when the prosecution revealed one final piece of evidence, a recording. It was a conversation between Daniel and one of his victims, secretly captured by the private investigator. In it, Daniel's voice was chillingly calm as he threatened legal action against the woman if she exposed him. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. As the recording played, Daniel's defense team scrambled to object, but the damage was done. Even the judge's expression hardened as the tape ended, leaving an uncomfortable silence in its wake. During the recess, Rebecca stepped outside for a moment to catch her breath. The weight of everything, the testimony, the evidence, the sheer magnitude of Daniel's betrayal, felt like a heavy burden. But she wasn't alone for long. Eleanor joined her, her elegant demeanor offering a quiet strength. "You're doing incredibly well," she said, her voice soothing. "This is hard, but it's necessary." Rebecca nodded, grateful for the support. "I just want it to be over," she admitted. "I want to move on." "You will," Eleanor said firmly, "and when you do, you'll be stronger for it." When the court reconvened, it was time for the defense to present its case. Daniel's lawyer tried to paint him as a man under immense pressure, a victim of circumstances beyond his control. They argued that his actions, while misguided, were never intended to cause harm. But Daniel's own testimony unraveled any sympathy the defense had managed to garner. When questioned about his motives, he deflected and evaded, his answers laced with arrogance. At one point, he even attempted to shift blame onto Rebecca, claiming her demands for a perfect life had pushed him to make desperate decisions. Rebecca's jaw tightened, her anger barely contained, but Vanessa placed a calming hand on her arm, silently reminding her to stay composed. Daniel's words only served to further alienate him from the court, the judge's patience visibly wearing thin. Finally, it was time for closing arguments. The prosecution delivered a powerful summary, emphasizing the calculated nature of Daniel's actions and the extensive harm he had caused. The defense tried one last time to plead for leniency, but their arguments rang hollow. The judge adjourned the court to deliberate, leaving everyone in tense anticipation. Rebecca sat with Eleanor and Sophie, their silent support a reminder of how far they had come together. When the judge returned, the room fell silent once more. The verdict was delivered with a weight that seemed to settle over everyone present. Guilty on all counts. The relief was palpable. Rebecca exhaled deeply, the tension finally releasing from her shoulders. Daniel's sentence was extended by an additional 10 years, with significant financial restitution required to repay his victims. As Daniel was led away in handcuffs, he glanced back at Rebecca. For a brief moment, their eyes met. His expression was a mix of anger, regret, and something that almost resembled pleading. But Rebecca didn't look away. She held his gaze until he was out of sight, her own expression unyielding. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca stood with Eleanor and Sophie as reporters swarmed them for comments. Eleanor, ever poised, addressed the crowd. "Today's verdict is a victory not just for us, but for anyone who has ever been manipulated or exploited. Justice has been served, and we can finally begin to heal." Rebecca added her own words, her voice strong and clear. "This isn't just the end of Daniel's story, it's the beginning of ours. We've reclaimed our lives, and we're moving forward with strength and purpose." The three women embraced, a symbol of resilience and unity that resonated far beyond the courthouse steps. In the weeks that followed, Rebecca focused on rebuilding her life with renewed energy. Her business continued to thrive, and she launched a new initiative, a support network for victims of financial and emotional abuse. Eleanor and Sophie joined her efforts, their shared experiences fueling a mission to empower others. Rebecca's story became a beacon of hope for many, a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of standing up for oneself. She had faced the storm, weathered its fiercest winds, and emerged stronger on the other side. The tension in the air was unmistakable as Rebecca prepared for the final showdown. This wasn't a simple courtroom hearing. It was the culmination of everything she had endured, every battle she had fought, and every piece of herself she had reclaimed. The stakes were higher than ever, not just for her, but for everyone Daniel had wronged. This was her moment to ensure that no more victims would suffer at his hands. Rebecca stood in front of her mirror that morning, steadying herself with deep breaths. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman transformed. She wasn't the same person who had once believed in Daniel's lies. She had been broken, but she had rebuilt herself stronger than ever. Today, she wasn't just fighting for justice, she was fighting for closure. The courtroom was packed to capacity. Spectators whispered among themselves, reporters scribbled furiously, and a palpable sense of anticipation hung in the air. Rebecca entered with Eleanor and Sophie by her side, the trio united by their shared determination. Across the room, Daniel sat with his defense team, his face a mix of defiance and desperation. Even now, he clung to the illusion that he could talk or scheme his way out of the hole he had dug. The day began with opening statements from both sides. The prosecution wasted no time laying out the gravity of Daniel's crimes. They painted a vivid picture of a man who had used charm and deceit to prey on the vulnerable, exploiting their trust for personal gain. The defense, meanwhile, attempted to soften Daniel's image, portraying him as a man overwhelmed by circumstances and poor judgment. Rebecca could barely suppress her frustration as she listened to the defense's excuses. Poor judgment, circumstances. These weren't mistakes. They were deliberate choices, calculated and cruel. But she stayed composed, knowing the truth would speak louder than any spin the defense could muster. The turning point came when the prosecution presented new evidence, a series of emails and financial transactions that exposed the full extent of Daniel's schemes. These weren't just isolated incidents, they revealed a pattern of behavior spanning years. Each email was a puzzle piece, fitting neatly into a picture of greed, manipulation, and betrayal. But the most damning piece of evidence was a recorded phone call between Daniel and one of his victims. In the audio, Daniel's voice was cold and calculated as he made thinly veiled threats, pressuring the woman into silence. The courtroom was silent as the recording played, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Rebecca stole a glance at Daniel during the playback. His confident facade had cracked, his jaw tightening as he avoided making eye contact with anyone. For the first time, it seemed, the weight of his actions was catching up to him. When Rebecca took the stand, the room seemed to hold its breath. She recounted her story with clarity and poise, her voice unwavering as she described the pain and betrayal she had endured. But she didn't stop there. She also spoke about the strength she had found, the resilience that had carried her through the darkest moments. "Daniel didn't just betray me," she said, her voice steady. "He betrayed every woman who trusted him, every client who believed in him, and every person who saw him as an example of success. He used people, manipulated them, and left them to pick up the pieces of their lives while he walked away unscathed. But not this time. This time, he will face the consequences." Her words resonated deeply, drawing murmurs of agreement from the spectators. Even the judge seemed moved, his expression softening as he nodded for her to continue. When the defense cross-examined her, they attempted to undermine her credibility, suggesting that her actions were driven by spite rather than a genuine desire for justice. But Rebecca refused to be rattled. "I'm not here out of spite," she said firmly. "I'm here because I believe in accountability. Daniel needs to answer for what he's done, not just to me, but to everyone he's hurt." The climax of the trial came when Daniel himself took the stand. His lawyer had clearly coached him, and he began with a carefully rehearsed speech about remorse and redemption. He claimed he had seen the error of his ways and wanted nothing more than to make amends. But under cross-examination, his facade quickly crumbled. The prosecutor pressed him on the details of his schemes, forcing him to admit to actions he had previously denied. Each question peeled back another layer of his lies, revealing the truth beneath. When asked why he had targeted so many women, Daniel's response was chilling in its lack of remorse. "It wasn't personal," he said with a shrug. "It was business." The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Rebecca's hands tightened into fists as she fought to contain her anger. For all his talk of redemption, Daniel had shown his true colors once again. The final moments of the trial were tense, as both sides delivered their closing arguments. The prosecution reminded the court of the overwhelming evidence against Daniel, emphasizing the pain and suffering he had caused. The defense, meanwhile, pleaded for leniency, arguing that Daniel deserved a chance to rebuild his life. But the judge's verdict was clear and decisive. Daniel was found guilty on all counts, his sentence extended by an additional 15 years. The court ordered full restitution to his victims, ensuring that every dollar he had stolen would be returned. As the verdict was read, Rebecca felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was over. The man who had once seemed untouchable was finally being held accountable for his actions. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for interviews. Rebecca, Eleanor, and Sophie stood together, their unity a powerful statement. "Justice has been served," Rebecca said, addressing the crowd. "This isn't just about Daniel. It's about sending a message that no one is above the law. We fought for what was right, and today, we won." Her words were met with applause and cheers, a testament to the impact their fight had made. In the days that followed, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and seemingly insurmountable odds. But through it all, she had found strength she didn't know she possessed. She had reclaimed her life, not just for herself, but for every person who had been hurt by Daniel's lies. Rebecca's story became an inspiration to others, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is hope for redemption and renewal. She launched a foundation to support victims of financial and emotional abuse, using her experiences to help others rebuild their lives. The courtroom victory marked the end of one chapter in Rebecca's life, but the resolution was just the beginning of her new journey. As the media frenzy died down and Daniel disappeared behind bars, Rebecca found herself reflecting on everything she had endured. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the battles in court. Each moment had tested her in ways she never thought possible. And yet, she had emerged stronger, more self-assured, and with a clear sense of purpose. For weeks after the trial, Rebecca took time to breathe, something she hadn't allowed herself to do in what felt like years. She visited her favorite spots in the city: the art museum where she used to draw inspiration, the cozy cafe where she would sketch designs, and the park where she could sit for hours, watching life unfold. These moments were hers, free from the weight of Daniel's shadow. Eleanor and Sophie became more than just allies in the fight against Daniel. They became lifelong friends. The three of them regularly met for coffee or dinner, their bond deepened by their shared experiences. Together, they laughed, reminisced, and supported one another as they rebuilt their lives. Sophie, now free from the financial ruin Daniel had nearly caused, expanded her business into a thriving enterprise. She credited Rebecca's unwavering strength as her motivation to keep going when things seemed impossible. Eleanor returned to her philanthropic roots, using her resources to establish a foundation that supported women who had been victims of financial abuse. She worked closely with Rebecca to identify ways they could create real, lasting change. Rebecca, too, threw herself into her work with renewed passion. She expanded her interior design business, taking on high-profile clients who admired not just her talent, but also her resilience. But it wasn't just about creating beautiful spaces anymore. Rebecca wanted her work to have meaning. She began offering pro bono services to shelters and community centers, transforming spaces for those in need. Her blog, once a small passion project, exploded in popularity after her story became public. Women from all over the world reached out, sharing their own stories of betrayal and resilience. Rebecca made it her mission to respond to as many messages as she could, offering encouragement and advice to those who felt lost. One particularly meaningful project came when Rebecca was asked to design the interior of a new women's resource center, funded by Eleanor's foundation. The center was meant to be a safe haven for women escaping abusive situations, providing them with shelter, counseling, and job training. As Rebecca walked through the empty space for the first time, she felt a deep sense of purpose. This wasn't just another design project. This was a chance to give back in a way that truly mattered. "I want this space to feel like hope," Rebecca told her team as they began planning. "Every color, every piece of furniture, every detail should remind these women that they are valued and capable of rebuilding their lives." The result was breathtaking. The center opened 6 months later, its bright, welcoming interiors a testament to Rebecca's vision. Women who walked through its doors often paused in awe, their faces lighting up as they realized this place was for them. On the 1-year anniversary of Daniel's conviction, Rebecca hosted a private gathering at her home. Eleanor, Sophie, Lauren, and a few close friends joined her to celebrate how far they had all come. The evening was filled with laughter and gratitude, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had defined Rebecca's life just a year earlier. At one point, Lauren raised her glass for a toast. "To Rebecca," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You didn't just survive, you thrived, and in doing so, you've inspired all of us to be stronger, braver, and more compassionate." Rebecca smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you," she said softly, "but I couldn't have done it alone. Each of you played a part in helping me find my way again, and for that, I'll always be grateful." As the guests left, and the house grew quiet, Rebecca found herself alone with her thoughts. She stepped out onto her balcony, the city lights twinkling in the distance. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. The weight of the past had lifted, leaving room for hope, possibility, and joy. Her phone buzzed. A notification from her blog. A woman from another state had left a heartfelt comment, thanking Rebecca for sharing her story and giving her the courage to leave a toxic relationship. Rebecca smiled, typing a quick response before setting her phone down. She had turned her pain into purpose, and the ripple effects were reaching farther than she ever could have imagined. Life wasn't perfect. Rebecca knew it never would be, but it was hers, and that was enough. She had learned that strength wasn't about never falling. It was about rising every time you did. She had learned that betrayal didn't define her, and neither did the person who had caused it. What defined her was the choices she made after, the life she chose to build despite the pain. Rebecca's story wasn't about revenge, though it might have seemed that way at first. It was about justice, resilience, and the power of starting over. It was about finding light in the darkest moments and using it to guide the way forward. To everyone who has followed this journey, thank you for watching. Rebecca's story is a reminder that no matter how broken you feel, you have the strength to rebuild. If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more inspiring tales of resilience and transformation. Together, we'll keep finding hope, one story at a time. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next chapter of our journey.